Hello there, you're tuned in to The Public Interest, a weekly program that allows for discussions on matters of national importance. As always, we have with us our Head of State, President David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Wendy.
And joining us today are Mr. Travis Chase from HGPTV Nightly News and Ms. Andrea Joseph from the National Communications Network. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. President, today I want to lead off today's discussion on a matter that has received fair amount of attention in the media over the past 2 weeks or so. It has to do with press freedom. There's been a lot of talk of censorship of the state media. What is your response to that, and what, in your view, should be the role of the state media in Guyana?
Well, as you point out, Wendy, it has been very controversial. The debate is very controversial. My answer is quite clear that the state have a responsibility, particularly in a country like Guyana, to provide public information. We must bear in mind that most media houses are located either in Georgetown or on the coastland. And a large part of our country is not adequately covered by the private media. The private media, to some degree, are driven by profit. And there's no profit in setting up a station at Let Them or Charlton or Wariwano. The result is that most of these areas do not get the full benefit of information. So the state has a responsibility to provide information to those communities, information on health, information on natural hazard like El Nino, information on epidemic diseases like Zika or malaria, or any other threats to the community. But beyond public information, I feel that the media must be free, and that is where the private media have a role. I don't believe that the state should attempt to control private media, and eventually I hope the state withdraws from competing with private media and just pay attention to its primary role of providing public information.
Thank you, sir. Your questions?
Okay, a very good morning, Mr. President. Based on our history and examination of Guyana's history when it comes to the state media, it shows that there is an apparent tendency to use it as maybe the horse and the bit. And the perception is still there. What are your thoughts, and how do you propose to change it, if you could, amidst the challenges of trust and respect and good moral, media ethics?
Well, as I said, under the Constitution, it is quite clear that all citizens have certain rights to transmit and to receive information. And the state cannot contradict or contravene the Constitution by preventing residents, citizens from receiving information. So that is carte blanche, in a way, for private media to operate, within certain limits, of course.
Yeah.
But as I see it, eventually the state must withdraw from competing with the private media in terms of publishing, newspapers or television services. The state's role is to provide public information. And I see that organizations like GINA or NCN could continue, but the commercial arms, in due course, not immediately, the commercial arms like the Chronicle newspaper should eventually revert to private ownership.
Okay, so you're seeing this as a period over time, even as we embark on another 50 years?
It's much harder than 50 years. It's a period of transition. But I don't believe that we need to get involved in that type of activity anymore. The history of the state media, as you may know, had its origins in the Second World War, when there was need to provide certain controls and certain messages because of the security situation during the war. After that, we had a period of constitutional crisis, and the British government continued to maintain control of information through the GIS. I don't believe that we need, as a state, to maintain those controls any longer. I believe in free media because, as head of state, head of government, I need criticism. I need to be told where the government is going wrong. I need an alert media community which could look at projects, look at the way people are being treated, look at the dangers of disease or environmental hazard, and alert the government to the people's concerns. I can't do it without criticism. No government can do it without criticism. I don't want people telling me, oh, everything is going fine, everything is going good. And I don't want the state media personnel to feel that their roles are simply to tell the government good things and not report what is happening on the other side. So let's be clear about this. Government is made up of three branches: the executive, which I head, the legislative, which is more or less the National Assembly, and the judicial branch. And the state media must report on all three branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial. In the legislative branch, for example, there's debate, because there are two sides to the story. There's a government side and an opposition side. I have to hear the opposition side to know what half the population is thinking, and what they're saying. So the state media must report on both sides. So in due course, the actual functions, the commercial functions, I hope, will disappear. But the state will continue to provide credible information to the entire population on the functioning of all three branches.
Thank you.
Mr. President, on the issue of free media, press freedom, Guyana is a signatory to the Chapultepec Declaration, which is one of the main planks of press freedom in the Americas. One clause in that declaration states, it says, the authorities must be compelled by law to make available in a timely and reasonable manner the information generated by the public sector. On many occasions, such information is not readily available. What is being done to honor that specific clause of the Chapultepec Declaration?
Well, as I said, it is the responsibility of the state media not to interfere with the private media in terms of transmission of information. That's a constitutional right that the private media have. And also to ensure that its own agencies like GINA do provide that information. It is done at some levels, of course. You have things like hinted on highlights. And it is my belief that every region should eventually have some form of radio or television station to transmit that information to the public. If the public is not exposed to that information, the public doesn't have access to that information, they can't make correct decisions. So I support the Treaty of Chapultepec, and I support the state's role in providing information, credible information to the public. And I pointed out earlier, because of the fact that the state is all over the country, it's everywhere, and the private media are not everywhere, the state has a double responsibility to ensure that the people are well informed.
You talk about the legislative. If we have these laws and there are no proper mechanism in place, then basically they're just statements of intent. Take, for example, the Office of the Commissioner of Information. What is being done to make that office fully functional?
Of course it's not functional now, but I don't think there would be need for an Office of Information simply to enforce what is already a constitutional provision. The state itself, through the Ministry of the Presidency and the various other ministries, should be able to ensure that communication function is effectively performed. I don't think you need a commissioner to do that. It is a constitutional responsibility. I'm not saying that I disagree with the appointment of the commissioner, but if the information function was operating as the Constitution intended, it should be superfluous to have a commissioner to ensure freedom.
Were we not enforcing the laws?
Well, what I'm saying, it is the duty of my government, of the Ministry of the Presidency, of the Office of the Prime Minister, of the various ministries, to provide information on a timely basis. And there's not a single cabinet meeting that does not deal with the question of information. There are several issues which arise, and the public is concerned, but I am convinced over the last 11 months that if information were provided in a timely manner, those so-called crises would not have occurred. something like LBI. If information was made available about the so-called closure of La Bonne Intention estate plantation, some of the confusion would not exist. But when the information is provided, people start to nod and say, yeah, but it is the responsibility of the government to give information to the public. That estate had the mill had virtually ceased to operate, 5 years ago. A few people know that. And there were persons in LBI who were not fully employed because the factory was not functioning.
How do you think your government is performing in making information readily available?
We could do better. I admit that. The government could be more timely in the provision of information to the public. And as I said, I would like to see every region having outlets. And as I answered the question before, there must be a posture on the part of the state to provide that information before a crisis emerges, before a crisis erupts. So we have to provide that information. Nobody else will do it. So I think we can do better, and this is what we're working on. That is the role of media policy, and this is what I've said repeatedly. We have to ensure that in the National Assembly, information provided by both the government side and the opposition side is made available to the public. We have to disseminate that information more widely, and we have to ensure that no obstacle is placed in the way of the media in terms of reporting to the public.
Any other question on this topic?
No.
All right, we'll move into the second segment of the program where we can ask questions on any topic or matter. Mr. President, let me go first. We've seen reports that the Ogle Airport will be renamed after the late Mr. Eugene Cariah. What are your views on this, sir?
Well, I have very positive views because I had put the suggestion to the Ogle International Airport Board several months ago, and this is because research which has been done indicates that Mr. Cariah, I think he must have been born well over 100 years ago. He's dead, over 50 years, I think. Was a distinguished minister of the government. He was a minister of communications, responsible for aviation. He was a pilot. He made contributions in the National Assembly. In those days, it might be called Legislative Assembly, to aviation, to Guyanization of the public service. I would say that his career was stellar. He is actually a national awardee. So there's no doubt in my mind that he's a deserving person after whom the airport should be named. Controversy arose not because of the character of Mr. Cariah, but because of the small-mindedness of some persons who know nothing about Mr. Cariah or what he's done for this country. And that is very disturbing, that, petty-minded people who don't know the man, try to prevent the airport from being named after him. And I was very disappointed at a personal level at the malicious behavior of those persons. I was very, very disappointed. Anybody who looks at the career of Mr. Cariah, Mr. Eugene Francis Cariah, could not but come to the conclusion that this is a person of whose record we should be proud of. And there's no doubt in my mind that he's a fit and proper person after whom the airport should be named. So I listened to criticism. I did meet with some of the persons who objected several months ago to the airport being named after him. But as I said, I continue to be disappointed that they would put personality in front of nationality, that they would put petty personal interests in front of the national interest. It is my view that it's in the national interest that the airport be named after a son of the soil who's done a lot for Guyana. That's my view.
So our public sector employees are holding their breath over the delay in the publication, the findings of the Public Sector COI, which is headed by Professor Lutchman. Can you speak directly to this and also Office of Progress report on the COI into the allegations made by self-confessed drug lord Barry Datcharam?
Well, we need to get information before we jump to conclusions, and in several cases. This administration has convened commissions of inquiry. In terms of the public service, I have not seen the Lutchman inquiry. It ought to have been the basis on which we come to conclusions about what modifications have to be made to the emoluments of public servants. And I would like to get it, if I can get it tomorrow. My Minister of Finance could study it and be guided. There's no obligation on our part to accept everything it says, but it'll obviously guide us in terms of creating more professional public service. As far as the other inquiry is concerned, the Barry Dataram matter, again, it is now in session. It should be a simpler, shorter inquiry, and I hope that by next week we'll be able to report to the public what the findings are. In the other case, of course, the inquiry into the prison disturbances in March, that is still taking place. I have asked that that be brought to an end as quickly as possible. We are concerned with the circumstances which led to the outbreak of disorder at a particular time, at a particular place. And I would like the public to get the benefit of the recommendation of that inquiry as quickly as possible. We cannot bring about changes in those three areas, in Kano, in the public service, and in the prison service, without getting the facts. Some people have even criticized the decision to have an inquiry into the prison service disorder, but I feel it's justified. A lot of information's come out, and we now know better what to do, but it's going on much too long. It's going on much too long.
None of those recommendations from the last inquiry was held under the PPP. Would you say any of them were at all implemented?
Well, it's more than that. That inquiry was held in the wake of the escape in 2002, the Mashamani jailbreak. Most of them were not implemented by the very administration which convened the inquiry in the first place. I had the benefit after that of being a member of the Discipline Forces Commission, and even then we made recommendations which were not implemented by the last administration. So what happened last year when the present coalition administration got into office, there was a stack of unimplemented recommendations. And that's what caused the crisis. If they had been implemented 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when they were made, we would not have had the crisis last March. But that is one of the legacies which our administrations had to bear, and we're working on that now. That's one of the reasons why I knew almost instinctively that we had to go to Mazruni. And within days, I went to Mazruni with the Minister of State and the Minister of Public Security to implement and to consider the implementation from the recommendation which had been made in 2003 by the Discipline Forces Commission. So these commissions of inquiry are important, and I, as president, do not intend to ignore them. And I'm quite confident that some of the problems we face in the public service, in the prison service, in the counter-narcotics agencies could be resolved if the responsible officials and ministers implemented recommendations which came out of these inquiries. That's why we hold inquiries, to find out.
Okay. Labor Day coming up. There seems to be a shift in the labor relations with some of the main unions, and persons are happy about the change. As you, from the workers' perspective, and also as president, and based on the background we've had over the years, what are your thoughts as we approach Labor Day, and what would you say to members of the public and the workers?
Well, the party which I lead, the People's National Congress Reform, is based on workers. It's based on cordial relations with the unions. Obviously, the workers constitute the majority of the population, so we have no interest in waging war on the workers. We would like to see more responsible labor relations. That is why the ministry has been renamed Ministry of Social Protection, because my concern is protecting workers, whether they are in the mines, in the gold fields. Every single death must be investigated. Malpractices must be investigated. I have met with the Minister of Natural Resources to ensure that the is stricter enforcement of labor codes within the mines, whether they're gold mines or bauxite mines. I want to make sure workers are protected. Quite recently, you saw in the town of New Amsterdam, the mayor, and there again, you see one of the benefits of local government election. The mayor is going around that town to examine the conditions under which workers have to operate. And my answer to your question is that we are concerned with the protection of workers, social protection, and we are concerned that also all agencies, whether they are mining companies, whether they're government ministries, return to the bargaining table. We don't want to sit down and dictate workers will get 2.5%. Let us sit down and listen to the workers through their representatives. But also those representatives must be well administered. They must hold regular elections. They must have transparent accounts. And they must genuinely consult with their own workers to represent their interests. So you're quite right. We want to put labor relations on a new footing. There's been some misunderstanding about not having a Ministry of Labor, but as far as I'm concerned, the Ministry of Social Protection sends a stronger message that we're going to protect you rather than a passive message of labor relations. It is a positive message that we are sending, and I hope that on the 1st of May, more positive movement takes place towards bringing the unions together so that the government could be satisfied that the unions don't squabble among each other, and they look at the workers' welfare, the quality of life in a holistic manner. So I think there's a bright future for labor. And as far as I'm concerned, my main preoccupation is protecting them from situations that we have found, mines, restaurants, and relations with foreign companies, and the reluctance of official agencies to sit down at the bargaining table and listen to their concerns.
Okay.
The last time we started a conversation on the Psychotropic Substances Act, I'm informed that some prisoners will be moved to Mazaruni. But how are we doing in terms of having that piece of legislation addressed?
Well, as far as the ingestion of those substances is concerned, we need to get more evidence. I am not sure that I started the conversation. I don't know who started the conversation. But if you're speaking with Granger, are you speaking with Granger?
Right.
Well, there is a lot of information that is being provided in other countries. Some countries with perhaps more orderly administration. I'm not saying there's a disorderly administration here, but countries which have the ability to supervise and enforce and ensure quality controls have detected that the misuse or abuse of those substances, particularly by adolescents, could lead to early death. We have to be very careful. Sometimes we copy practices in developed countries which have a better regulatory framework, and I would like to see a lot more study done in Guyana before we move ahead. I think the first step might be decriminalizing it, but I would not be one to participate in encouraging the use of those substances at any level, either adolescent or adult. But as I said, this is not something that is a preoccupation of the administration at the present time. I would not counsel the use of marijuana by young people, by anybody.
Would you admit that is chiefly responsible for the overcrowding of our prisons?
I cannot say what the figures are, but in my own little way, I have, as you know, I have released persons from prison who, particularly women, and particularly mothers, who have been incarcerated for those offenses. It is a major factor, and as you know, there was a team or a joint team between the legislative branch, or between the executive branch and the judicial branch, to examine sentencing policy. So I think one step might be to move towards non-custodial sentences. The person should not be incarcerated simply for using, but I think trafficking, that is cultivation, preparation, and sale, are all in a different category. But I think in days to come, in years to come, there'll be a more liberal attitude, and I don't see people being imprisoned for using those substances. But selling is something else.
All right, you just touched briefly there on not being able to provide statistics on the prison information. This brings us now to the Statistical Bureau and its function. In today's world, there is need for more data, be it in demographic statistics, wherever. Do you see a change for the role, the traditional role, only centered on certain aspects of our country's development?
Exactly. In fact, even prior to entering into government last May, I had recommended that we create a statistical authority, not just a little bureau. Even the name sends a message, that it is small. I see an authority which is going to be rehoused. I think premises have already been acquired by the Ministry of Finance. And quite frankly, you cannot run a proper administration unless you get proper information, proper statistics about the population, about the behavior of the performance of the economy, about employment. Trends are changing all of the time, and you need up-to-date statistics, literally on a daily basis, not periodically, every 5 years or every 10 years like we have a census. We need a continuous flow of precise information if we are going to plan. So yes, there's going to be a statistical authority, and yes, it's going to be properly staffed, and I think within weeks rather than months, you'll probably hear about the statistical authority being rehoused in a better accommodation in Georgetown.
One final question.
So what's the latest on the Venezuela controversy?
I went to New York last week, and I did not get an opportunity to raise the matter with the Secretary General because of the fact that several, dozens of heads of state were there for the signing of the agreement. I have written the Secretary General again, asking him to make a clear statement on the way forward. When last we met, he was to send a team back to Venezuela, and because he, given his role, wanted to ensure that both sides wanted the same thing. Our side, the Guyana side, wants to have a judicial settlement, or juridical settlement, if you want to call it that. We want to go to court, put our case, and have the matter determined by a tribunal. It is clear to me that the government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela does not share my interests, and they are simply stalling. Up to now, our ambassador to Caracas has not been able to present her credentials, although she has been given agrément. And up to now, the government of Venezuela has not indicated to the Secretary General that it is prepared to pursue a judicial settlement to the controversy. And at present, if you want an update, I have written the Secretary General calling for him to make a ruling very soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, for spending this half hour with us. Thank you, Andrea and Travis, for joining us today. And thank you, viewers, for watching. Do remember to join us again next week for another program. Goodbye.